We speak today about a very strange and remarkable phenomenon right across the pre-modern world, existing in Europe till the Age of Enlightenment, trials against animals, judicial trials against objects, presuming objects and animals could think like humans can do and are responsible for their deeds and have to justify themselves before lawyers and judges. It was presumed that animals from all kinds are responsible for their actions and for the outcomes of their actions and had to justify themselves before human courtrooms, before judges and lawyers. It was presumed that animals or even objects like trees or bells and so on had moral responsibility, a free will, a full knowledge of that what they are doing, a full knowledge of that what takes place and happens in human society, and would participate in human society, knowing the legal laws of human societies and having the duty to obey to them. And this was not a joke. This was taken seriously and had severe consequences, especially with respect to the lives of the animals and to their well-being. I present one remarkable example that took place in Autun in southwest France in the beginning of the 16th century. Rats were accused of having committed a crime, of having devastated major parts of the harvest, of the barley harvest. The vicar ordered the rats that they have to appear in court. But completely unexpectedly, they didn't appear in the courtroom, and their official lawyer, Bartholomew Chassenet, explained the order was not known among all the settlements of rats in the region. The servants of the court should pronounce a formal order in all parts of the region. The jury followed this proposal and sent its servants to all parts of the region, where they explained to the rats that they have to come to the scheduled date. However, even to the second meeting, the rats didn't appear, and the human participants in the courtroom were astonished. And Chassenet was asked by the lawyer why the rats didn't arrive to the second meeting. And he explains that the rats were divided into sick and sane, old and young, female and male individuals, and that therefore they would need different time spaces for the travel to the jury. And therefore, the judge invited the rats for the third time and hoped they would come to this third time. But again, they didn't arrive to the third meeting with all the lawyers, judges, witnesses and audience waiting in the room. And now Chassenet explained that the accusers should pay a price and should guarantee that the cats would not wait at the road the rats have to take to arrive at the courtroom, and that they have to be careful and have to take all precautions to secure the travel of the rats. And again, the rats didn't appear. Let's take another example. In South Tyrol, the judge Konrad Sperksa and 11 jurors announced young and pregnant female mice should have a longer period of time to leave the damaged field, and to reach this area the jury had ordered them to settle. Caterpillars devastated some fields in the region of Lausanne in 1519. An official messenger went to them and ordered to appear in court, and the judge held some of these caterpillars in his hands and ordered them to leave the region within 3 days. Punishment of animals and objects was common also in Greco-Roman antiquity. Plinius tells us that the Romans used to hang some dogs by their legs at gallows on the Capitol annually to commemorate their catastrophic failure at the assault of the Gauls in 387 BC. Trials were used against all kinds of animals: moles, caterpillars, flies, snakes, rats, horses, birds, pigs. Worms who damaged wooden houses and furniture. Horses helping to kidnap people. Grasshoppers eating complete harvests, and pigs eating babies were accused of having committed a crime and were often sentenced to death. And the forms of the execution applied to animals were the same as those applied to human delinquents. The execution took place before an audience to deter people to follow the criminal animals. Those societies which do not have courtrooms and judicial procedures take their private forms of revenge actions. So crocodiles who killed humans in Asia or in Africa were prosecuted by the revengers, the folksmen of the killed person, and they went on war as a form of revenge action applied to the single responsible crocodile or to the whole group of crocodiles as a typical form of revenge action. What people do provide is that animals have moral responsibility, a free will, and a full intelligence absolutely comparable to the intelligence people ascribe to other people. Archaic people do not make much difference between the intelligence of an intelligent animal and the intelligence they presume as existing in the mind of peoples. The people recognize animals as moral persons with a free will, free to decide whether they want to go, whether they want to act this or another way, able to decide whether they want to leave fields or not, able to sign and to keep contacts with humans, and able to know the legal laws of human societies. And it was presumed that they share the moral values of humans, and even that they are Christians, because the typical form of punishment in medieval courts was to excommunicate animals from the church when they were tried as having done crimes. How can we explain this? How it is possible to explain this strange kind of behavior? First of all, we have to think about what I have told about the animism of archaic people, that they tend to attribute and to assign intentions, reason and mind to rocks, stones, winds, waters, clouds, and that they tend to assign mental powers to every kind of entity and to every kind of dead matter. And when people tend to assign mental powers to objects, then it is clear that these people do not have the fine discriminations between different stages of mental abilities pertaining to vertebrates, to mammals, to make discriminations between caterpillars on the one hand and dogs and pigs and horses on the other hand, between dogs and pigs on the one hand and apes to the other hand, and therefore that they have not the mental power to discriminate between animals and humans. House and McDougall report about the Sarawak of Borneo. I cite, the natives make, without questioning and in most cases without explicit statements, even to themselves, the practical assumption that the mental processes of animals, their passions, desires and motives, and powers of reasoning are of the same order and in fact extremely similar to their own. That the natives entertain this belief in a very practical manner is shown in their conduct when preparing for hunting or fishing excursion. If, for example, they are preparing to poison the fish of a section of the river with a tuber root, they always speak of the matter as little as possible and use the most indirect and fanciful modes of expression. Thus they will say, there are many levers fallen here, meaning there are plenty of fish in this part of the river. And these elaborate precautions are taken lest the birds should overhear their remarks and inform the fish of their intentions, when of course the fish would not stay to be caught but would swim away to some other part of the river. So, and this explains why archaic people do not only accuse animals before court rooms, but that they also take animals as judges. The Thunder of Sudan, even in the 1930s, according to the report made by Evans Pritchard, took termites as judges to decide about human decisions and human intentions. The termites were asked what the people have to do and how one should decide over human deeds. The termites were asked by twigs stuck into their burrows, and from the amount of parts eaten by the termites, the thunder decided what the termites would like to say and how they would decide. So animals around the globe were working as advisors, arbiters, friends, judges, and therefore also as delinquents. So children and primitives tend to project the fully formed human personality in the animal only because they don't know yet about the differences between matter and soul, aware and unaware beings, humans and animals. The low ability to think about the own person accounts for the idea that all things in the world have their own intentions, wishes and ideas. Only formal operational thinking develops a fine scale that takes different levels of subjective structures into consideration, ranging from automatic movements, such as those of machines or waterfalls, to unintended actions such as reflexes or unaware movements while sleeping, forms of instinctive behavior among animals or among humans, referring to their biological drives, impulsive forms of behavior, shallow forms of speaking and acting, and at the intellectual summit of subjective structures, reflexive forms of thinking such as logic or mathematics. So only on the adolescent stage of formal operations, humans know that dogs and horses have feelings, but scarcely locusts and flies. Only formal operational thinking understands that it is absurd to attribute subjectivity, freedom of will, responsibility, abilities to think, and participation in human society to cattle and bees, and that judges cannot prescribe to mice, butterflies, and wolves to which area they should move, and that it is useless to punish them with when they disobey. And so we see that the child, by their 7th or 10th year, cannot see the differences between different animals and between different stages of thinking and reasoning. And that small children understand flowers and trees as reasoning persons. And therefore, they have no idea that dogs and cattle do not think the way humans do. And therefore, it is absolutely clear that the trials against animals are an empirical indicator of the cultural level of pre-modern man, indicator of the achieved level of intelligence, reason, psyche, and personality. Complete layers of consciousness and reflectivity are missing among such people, layers which are activated only at the formal operational level. And therefore, developmental psychology explains the whole stuff. Development psychology explains why ancient and premodern humans charged animals, brought them to courtrooms, and punished them by beating or by execution. And therefore, as long as humans charged animals, prosecuted them, executed them, as long humans stood on anthropological stages of children, stood on stages of children below the 10th developmental year. If we only knew from ancient people their behavior towards animals, if we only knew the existence of accusations and of formal judicial trials against animals, this would suffice beyond the slightest doubt that these people stood on anthropological stages of children and that they did not develop the adolescent stage of formal operations. It is a clear and a full empirical indicator. More. It is absolutely impossible that in modern society, anywhere in the world, at least in the cultural regions with admission to modern Western style of culture, that in such milieus would ever take place a judicial procedure against animals. It is absolutely impossible that anywhere in a modern settlement, in a modern cultural milieu, let's say in Hong Kong or in Tokyo or in Shanghai or in Canberra or in Buenos Aires, a court would take place with accusations against animals, with a formal trial against animals made by lawyers and judges, presuming these animals would have made a delict, providing free will, moral responsibility, and knowledge about laws. It is absolutely impossible. And it is absolutely impossible because modern people, even people in most parts of developing nations, not in all parts of developing nations, but in most parts of developing nations, stay on anthropological stages of humans beyond the 10th developmental year, stay on stages made by the formal operational stage. Only people staying on stages of children aged 5, 6, or 7 years. Only such people can accuse animals, bring them before court rooms, and can punish them to death, presuming they had a free will and a moral responsibility. We don't need to know more than this. My theory is the only theory in the whole realm of social sciences and humanities that have found the key to explain the phenomenon. There was no other author who ever has brought this example before the knowledge developmental psychology has provided and has combined the knowledge of developmental psychology with that historical example.